Hey, tonight we're going to be in Mark chapter 2, and as you turn there, I really want to focus on something very practical and applicational, all right? We're doing something in the North American Mission Board to try to bring attention to good old-fashioned soul winning and evangelism and the fact that people just learn to share their faith and actually do it. I know every Sunday you come and you get to sit under one of the very best expositors in North America. And he really is. It's not blowing smoke at all. He really is. And so you have the opportunity to listen to a lot of the Word of God. It's important that you actually practice what I know he preaches you to do, to actually do it. And so often we know so much more of the Word than we put into action. And tonight we're going to talk about, who is your one as we talk about sharing our faith. We're about planting churches all over North America and try to do that for the purpose of reaching people with Christ. We just take so many things for granted. As I said, I have 6 children. Our youngest 3 we adopted from Ethiopia, Philippines, and China. So we have 6 kids from 4 different countries. So when we watch the Olympics, I tell people we win, okay? We do. But it's interesting, though, with the different perspective you get. Like when we went to pick up JM, I love to tell a story about, we picked JM up in the Philippines. We got him when he was 12. He's now 20. But it was interesting, when I got there, they said, now be very careful with him because he's not used to hot water. And I what do you mean? They said, well, in their particular orphanage, they didn't have hot water. He basically took sink baths. And so he said he could harm himself. So when you go back to the hotel, make sure that you help him understand how hot the water can get or he'll harm himself. And I said, okay, no problem. So we go back to the hotel. You can only imagine the things you do in a hotel. The first night, they picked him up on the streets when he was 5, wandering the streets. And he was in the orphanage from 5 to 12, and then we brought him home when he was 12. Can you imagine the first night in a hotel when you've been wandering the streets and then in an orphanage and with a bunch of, it was just, he was bouncing off the bed, he was just really excited. But it came time for bath time, and I said, JM, come here, buddy, I want to show you something. So we go in the bathroom, and he had really good English. They taught him good English. He could speak good English. And so I said, watch this. And I turned the water on lukewarm. And I said, here, buddy, let me have your hand. And he gave me his hand, and I put it underneath that lukewarm water, and I said, now watch this. And I just gradually turned the water warmer and warmer and warmer until he began to feel hot water for the very first time. And he said with those big brown Filipino eyes, that is wonderful. And I said, it is wonderful. You're going to love it. And now you take off your clothes, and I'm going to go in that room, and you jump in the shower. And he said, shower? Well, what's a shower? And I wasn't thinking, there's some things they taught him in English, but some things did not translate because they didn't have a shower. So I had to explain a shower to him. You ever explained a shower to somebody? It's like it's water from heaven. You're going to love it. I did the best I could. And there's some things we just forgot because, and they just didn't translate. It's like the first time we took him out to eat. The first time I took him out to eat, I ordered for him. I said, just bring him some chicken fingers. And then he's like, no, I not eat chicken fingers. And I said, no, son, they're not chicken fingers. That's just what they call them. He goes, well, why do they call them that? And I was like, I don't really know. Just dip them in barbecue sauce and it'll be all right. You can only imagine the first time we had buffalo wings, There's always an explanation in our house or an international conflict. But what was amazing, he went in there, took a shower, and 45 minutes later, he comes out all shriveled up in his matchy pajamas, just singing, loving life. And still to this day, even at 20, when he's taking a shower, he'll be singing and love it because he still what? Remembers what it's like not to have hot water. He still appreciates something like hot water. Now, sir, what's your name? Dave, it wasn't a trick question, Dave. You had to look like a... Perhaps you've been a member here long, you've just learned not to trust your pastor. But listen, it just is not a trick question. All right, Dave, I'm going to ask you something. I picked you, Dave, because you look like the cleanest guy in this section, all right? So now be straight up answer me here, Dave, all right? We haven't done this beforehand. I'm just picked him randomly. So, David, be straight up honest with me. You had a shower in the last 2 or 3 days. All right. We're all relieved. All right. So, Dave, tell me, I'm serious. When you took that shower, you felt the hot water. You felt that hot water. Did you go, yes, hot water? Did you do that? You didn't do it. You see, that's what I thought. You see, folks, David, he's what's wrong with America. All right? We've looked for it, and now we found him. All right? Now, I'm teasing sort of David, but here's the problem. Here's the problem. He didn't, and neither did you, neither did I. We just take some things for granted because we get so used to them, we don't think twice about it. We really just don't. The same thing is true when it comes to churches quite often. A moment ago when I just said, hey, we're going to plant so many churches, you're like, it's, perhaps we need it, but you see churches everywhere. But I want to remind you, it's not like it is here everywhere. It's just not. Interesting, there's more churches in, say, Mississippi is the most church state in all of North America. Did you know in Mississippi there is one Southern Baptist church in Mississippi for every 1,394 people in Mississippi? I mean, that's incredible. Missiologists say that you need one church for every 2,000 people in population. Now, this is not evangelical churches. That's just Southern Baptist churches. What we say is we wish every state had that many gospel influences, okay? It's one way to look at it. And he said, well, what's Kentucky? I knew you'd ask. In Kentucky, it's one for every 1,724, so still a lot of churches. So when people think about starting churches in the South, they don't get that excited because sometimes they think about starting churches, that automatically makes them think of a church split. Or they had some student minister say at some point, go to the other part of town and start a church, and it was not a good experience, and it's a negative thing. But if you read the book of Acts, it's exactly what they were trying to do, to reach people all over the world. But let me tell you what it's like in some other parts of North America. You go up to somewhere like, say, New York. In New York, it's one for every 51,000. Or you go to Canada, and it's one for every 94,000. Do you know there's places in Canada where you can drive for 3 hours and not drive by another evangelical church? I mean, you as a church are helping plant a church in Colorado, and the needs are just incredible. And the world has come to us. Did you know the second largest city, if you will, second largest grouping of Ethiopians is not in Ethiopia? The second largest grouping of Ethiopians is actually in Washington, D.C. Hundreds of thousands. If you made them a city and put them in Ethiopia, it'd be the second largest city in Ethiopia, next to Addis. It's just incredible how the world has come to us. But are we really ready? When you read the Apostle Paul in Acts and all of his journeys, it's amazing how God has brought the world to us, but we must make the most of it. And it's easy to say, we need to be evangelistic. We need to share our faith. And sometimes we do that by bulk. It's like we like to pray by bulk because, there's no really way to hold that accountable. Now, when you think about what you want to do and how you grow in your faith, when we do it by bulk, there's no, we're not being specific enough to hold ourselves accountable. So let me ask you this. You can't win. You personally there's no way possible you could possibly reach the world. How could God use you, though, to reach one? I mean, if you had one, who would be your one that you would begin to pray for right now, that God would use you to impact and influence, and you would not stop praying for that one? Mine's name's Chris. All right, and may have some others that you want to pray for, but I want to encourage you to have one. I want you to look at a story that kind of emphasizes that exact same thing and the tenacity of it. Because so often, just like JM, all that excited about church, all excited about hot water, we don't get that excited about it because we're so used to it. So often the same thing is true, not only with the number of churches, but the fact that we hear the gospel so often that we just assume everybody else has, and it's just not the case. I'm convinced, I go all over North America, and people are far more interested in hearing about the gospel than we are in sharing about it. And we must be faithful. This is an easy thing for all of us to participate in. Mark chapter 2, in verse 1 through 12. I'll read through it, and then we'll come back and walk through the passage, all right? And when he, being Jesus, returned to Capernaum after some days, it was reported that he was at home. And many were gathered together so that there was no more room, not even at the door. And he was preaching the word to them. And they came, bringing to him a paralytic carried by 4 men. And when they could not get near him because of the crowd, they removed the roof above him. And when they had made an opening, they let down the bed on which the paralytic lay. And when Jesus saw, now remember this part, all right? When Jesus saw who? Their faith. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, son, your sins are forgiven. Now, some of the scribes were sitting there questioning in their hearts. I always get a kick out of that particular verse because every church I ever pastored had these people in it. They had people that would sit there thinking to themselves, all right? And then, again, in this form, a very critical fashion, they said, why does this man speak like that? Who is he? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? And immediately Jesus, perceiving in his spirit that they thus questioned within themselves, he knew what they were thinking, said, why do you question these things in your heart? Why are you thinking those things? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, your sins are forgiven, or say, rise, take up your bed and walk. But that you may know that the Son of Man has the authority on earth to forgive sins. He wanted them to know, look, the most important thing you need to understand is I have the authority on earth to forgive sins. That's what matters the most. Now, you're all uptight because I'm going to heal a guy physically. The fact of the matter is, he healed him physically, but eventually the paralytic died. Well, he says, look, I'm going to do something that's going to last forever, for eternity. I can forgive his sins. So he's trying to spank him a bit and teach him a lesson at the same time. And then look what he says. He said to the paralytic, goes back to him and says, hey, don't mind those fellas. I say to you, rise, pick up your bed, and go home. And then it's a mystery. Whatever. I'm not sure exactly what that is. And they left there saying, we've never seen anything like this before. I love that verse. When the paralytic is healed, he picks up his mat, puts it under his arm, takes off to home, and the last thing that Mark records, it says, and the people left there saying, we've never seen anything like this before. Now, that's incredible. That sounds like I grew up knowing that pass. That typically is what we said after Kentucky scored a touchdown, all right? We've never seen anything like this before, but I'm thankful for better days. It's a better day than when I grew up. But think about it. They left church saying, we've never seen anything like this before. Now, let's do this, all right? Let's rewind back, all the way to the first of this story and walk ourselves through this and see what happened. I love the Gospel of Mark. I know you're going through Luke. The Gospel of Luke, and it's an incredible gospel, and a much more detailed one than Mark. I like Mark because I believe Mark and I had a lot in common. Mark has an attention disorder, okay? I'm convinced he does, because you read 4 or 5 verses, and then boom, he changes the subject. You go another 6 or 7, and boom, he changes. He's all over the place, and when he tells a story, it's like skipping a rock on a pond. You know, he just tells bits and pieces. And I'm a lot like that. My wife gets so frustrated. She'd say, hey, did so-and-so have their baby? And I say, yeah, they had a baby. A boy or girl? And I was like, it is a baby. All right, it's a baby. I don't know how much it weighs. I don't know the name. I just know it was a baby. All right. I'm just easily distracted too. All right, the other day I was in Montana. Oh, my word, it was the longest 30 minutes of my life, and perhaps to the people I was speaking to, but they had windows on both sides in the auditorium. It was just terrible for me. I'd be speaking, all of a sudden, there goes a bird. I'm just so easily distracted. And that's a lot how Mark is in this passage, all right? And actually throughout the whole book. So remember that as we read through here, Mark really writes at 30,000 feet. He doesn't do details. So even when he tells a story, he tells it in a quick flyby, if you will. So I'm not adding to Scripture. There are just certain things that obviously happen that Mark didn't go in detail for. If you want detail, you go to Luke or you go to John. They'll give you more detail on a lot of things than Mark will. Typically, he's at 30,000 feet. So having that in mind, let's go back at the very beginning. What happened? Jesus in the house. And he's preaching the word to them. The place is packed. Jam-packed. They couldn't get anybody else in. And then all of a sudden, I heard a word from the Lord, all right? I was like, is that me? Am I just hearing things? Tersa's playing a joke on me. I just know he is. But he's in the house, and he's preaching the word to them. And then Mark says, there comes 4 men carrying a paralytic. They get there. There's no room, so they go up to the roof, and they dig a hole in the roof. All right, wait. Here's how it went down. Jesus is in the house, preaching the word to them. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, someone, we don't know who, but at least one person had an idea. One person had the idea that, hey, look, I heard what Jesus has done in other cities. I've heard how he's touched other people and healed other people. And hey, look, what if we were to go and get our friend? I'm sure he called him by name. Mark doesn't, because he doesn't do details. But I'm sure he called him by name. What if we were to go get our friend and take him to Jesus? I believe Jesus would change his life. All right, fellas, I can't do it by myself. You know, he's paralyzed. I can't do it myself. I'm going to need some help. So you guys in? You in? We know he got at least 3 others, because he said there's 4 men. We don't know how they all got together, but I'm sure they come up with a time. We're going to meet at the corner of so-and-so. We'll go to his house. We'll pick him up, and we'll take him there. Man, I'm so thankful for these guys, because they are willing to be inconvenienced for the sake of their friend coming to Jesus. And they have a sense of, look, there's no way he's going to get there unless we go get him and take him there. They do that. They meet up. They go to his house. They get him. They come taking him to where Jesus is. And this is where they enter the story of Mark. Here comes a paralytic carried by 4 men. They get there, and this is what I think is so funny. If you read it, it's really, really funny if you think about how Mark does it. He just says, there's no room, so they go to the roof, dig a hole in the roof, lower him down, and Jesus heals him. I mean, Mark acts like this happens every Sunday, you know? Like there's song, special music, sermon, dig hole in roof, invitation. I mean, no. Let's just slow it down. Something else had to happen. Now, can you imagine what went on with those 4 guys and the paralytic when they got there? They got there, looked in and said, my word, I don't see any seats at all. Now, this is where we know that they're not Baptist. All right? Because there's no seats and they stayed. You know, a Baptist sees no parking spot. They're already at the restaurant because they at least tried. You know what I mean? They're out of there. But these guys, they see no seats, and so they have to have I'm sure they had a little powwow, a little conference, if you will, and said, hey, boys, what should we do? And I can only imagine some of their thoughts. We don't know. Mark doesn't tell us. But my major is in psychology. They tell us in psychology that typically 1 out of every 4 people tend to be negative. All right? Now, don't point. All right? No need. Some guy back there is pointing at 2 people. Just don't point. But typically, I'm sure 1 out of those 4 probably was negative. You always have negative people in a church for some reason. We tend to draw some people that can round down. And one guy, I'm sure, was kind of like Eeyore, you know? I knew this wasn't a good idea. Or, you know, we should have come to the early service. Or you can only imagine some of the negativity coming out of this guy. I knew this wasn't a good idea. But all of a sudden, we don't know all that went on. But what we do know is that there is at least one guy, that had an idea. He said, now, hey, fellas, I got an idea. Now, you're going to think I'm crazy. But here's what we're going to do. What we're going to do is we're going to take him and we're going to put him on the roof. I can't help but think that the paralytic at that moment propped himself up and was like, dude, what? It's like, now settle down. It's going to be fine. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take you and put you on the roof, and then we're going to kind of guess where we think Jesus is, and then we're going to dig a big hole, and we're going to lower you down to where Jesus is, and boom, he's going to heal you. What do y'all think? Well, I'm sure one of those guys probably said, but we've never done it that way here before. So that's exactly what they do. Think about it. They put him up on the roof. And then they begin to dig a hole in the roof. Listen, can you imagine this Sunday as Dr. York speaks with his silver tongue? Midway through his sermon, I don't care how interesting or I don't care how good those fake stories he shares are. All I know is if someone starts digging a hole in the roof, I'm watching that, all right? It's amazing. When I pastored at Highview, it started raining on the roof, and it was amazing. You have 1,000 people all look up. Like, it's rain, you know? We're so easily distracted. Or you're in a service, and one baby starts crying. And hundreds of people, look at the baby. You know, like, it's a baby. They do that. And people are so easily distracted. I'm not the only one. So if someone's digging a hole in that roof, can you imagine? All of a sudden during the sermon, some dust begins to fall. Some more dust begins to fall. And David, you know, you'd be looking at, you look right up there and you think, oh my word, and then a hand comes through the roof. Another hand comes through the roof. And all of a sudden a hole begins to appear and a bigger hole appears. And then all of a sudden 4 heads look down. It says, all right, lower him down, Cletus. And they lower him down. And can you imagine all this going on? And Jesus is preaching the word to them. Now remember what I said. Jesus seeing what? Their faith decided to heal him. Jesus saw their faith. See the paralytics. Their faith. He's going to do something special in this guy. Listen, I think so too. Because, look, God can do much greater things through you than you could ever imagine. You say, well, I'm this, I'm that. Look, it's not about you. It's about your faith in the one who saved you and can make a difference in the life of your neighbor. Jesus saw them and healed him. And then, you know, as typical, Jesus heals him. And then there's some religious people in the church that's ticked about it. They're ticked. You can imagine what happened. I mean, if that did actually happen, can you imagine some of the conversations that would happen in the church? Well, can you imagine? Who in their right? It's those students again. I'm sure it's the students. Always a default. Blame it on the student minister. You know, it's always his fault. Can you imagine some people be more concerned about now having a hole in the roof than they are the salvation? I'll never forget. Jan, remember this? Jan Trisella Jaggers. It's their anniversary, and they came to Buck Run on their anniversary. Isn't that incredible? But they were. I remember when I first got to Highview, we had some ushers that were very focused on doing their job exactly like they should. And so we had 3 services in the morning. And I'll never forget, it was right before the second service. And there was a particular guy, I still remember his name, not going to say it. But he came up to me right before the service. He said, hey, Pastor. I said, yes, sir. He goes, don't look now, don't look now. Back left, back left. I said, what's happening back there? And he goes, there's a kid back there with a hat on. I said, you're kidding me. He said, no, he's got a hat on. What do you want me to do about it? I said, well, is it your hat? And he said, no. I said, well, then leave it alone. Went through the service, and I just finished, went into the invitation, invited people to come forward, and guess what? Here comes that hat. He comes down with tears in his eyes were real watery, and I put my hand in his, looked him in the eye, and said, take your hat off. I didn't say that. Who cares? Who gives a rip? You know, we get so focused on things that just don't matter in church often, when it's the salvation of men and women that we've been called to do. We got to be very careful. I mean, God's blessed you with so many things. I mean, this is an incredible facility, but it's really just a tool so that you can reach people. I mean, a youth room is a great facility, but it's a tool for you to reach. That's the ultimate reason for all of this. We get so nervous about a spill or so. I mean, it's just, we're all about reaching people. You know what I love about these 4 guys? We don't know their names. I said Cletus, it's not in the Bible, all right? I made that up. We don't know their names, and I'm thankful, but we know their heart and we know their passion. Their heart and their passion was whatever it takes. We're going to do whatever it takes. That means we got to go get him and pick him up and be inconvenienced, and we're going to go do that. We're going to get there. There's no room. They could have easily said, let's come back next week. Let's look and see when he's going to be back in the area. We'll do it another time. But no, we're going to get him to Jesus. We came here to bring him. We're going to get him to Jesus. I love the determination of whatever it takes. They take him to the roof, and they don't stop there. They dig a hole in the roof. That's not in the bulletin, and they lower him down to Jesus, and Jesus does something incredible. Man, I love those 4 guys. If you're a coach, you want these guys on your team. If you own a business, you want these guys working for you. Look, we're not all as smart as some professors. We're just not. We're not all as gifted as some. We're just not. Some of us, like myself, are just very ordinary people. Very ordinary. But I'm so thankful we serve a God that can do extraordinary things through ordinary people who are faithful in obedience to him. See, you may not be Billy Graham, but you can have a 1. I'm thankful for a guy named Bill. There's a unique story. Bill's a phone installer. Now, for you guys under 40, we used to have phones in our house that had to be installed. And you'd actually go there and stand by it and call somebody. But this particular guy named Bill saw this young couple, and as he was installing their phone, began to share with that young couple and began to share about Jesus with that young couple. So much so that he ended up asking the young man, Mike, if he had a relationship with Christ. And he says, no, I lived by church all my life in Morton's Gap, Kentucky, by First Baptist Morton's Gap, right in the shadow of a steeple. But no, I never asked Jesus in my heart. He said, well, let me tell you about what he did in my life. And long story short, he led Mike to the Lord. And then Glenda as well. And then they were baptized in Edgewood Baptist Church in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. It's crazy about that young couple. Just because Bill shared with them, everything changed at Mike and Glenda's house. What they did on Friday night changed. What they did on Saturday night changed. What they did on Sunday morning desperately changed. How they talked to each other changed. How they talked to their kids changed. Everything about them changed, radically changed. And I'm so grateful because, as you may have already guessed, that Mike and Glenda that's my mom and dad. I'm so thankful for a guy named Bill who took the time to share with one, Mike, who then shared with one, Glenda, who because of their influence, and it completely changed my life. Because of that, we tried to impact our kids and my 6 grandkids, and of just the power of one. And you know what's amazing is Bill has no idea the influence and impact that he's made. But when I get to heaven, if you can search out people, Bill's one of the first guys I want to find. Every one of you have somebody that at least directed you somehow. Who is your one? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. That's why we send missionaries all over the world. That's why at NAM we plant churches. We try to plant 1,000 every year all over North America, so that people can know the joy that perhaps you already found out that's available in Christ.